I just want to say that you guys here are in for a treat today. We have 4 mavens in wildlife photography that will be, spending time the next hour talking about, their experience, what they've done, and share some stunning photography of the shots they've taken out in the wild. So here's how it's going to work for the next hour. I'll briefly introduce each of them, and then they will come up here and talk a little bit about their work, share their photography, and then we'll open the last part of the hour for questions. So let's begin. Our first panelist is Don Wilson, who is a professional award-winning nature photographer and writer specializing in wildlife and destinations of high latitudes and high altitudes of the Rocky Mountain and Alaska. Her work is published widely, including more than 600 byline photos and articles. She was recognized as a top 10 female nature photographer to watch by Wild Planet Photo magazine, and is the past president of the North American Nature Photography Association. Dawn lives in Estes Park, Colorado, and guides tours and photo expeditions in Rocky Mountain National Park, Alaska, and Peru. Our second panelist is Peter Ismert. He's a conservation photographer and environmental scientist from Denver. He creates images and visual stories that engage our emotional connections with nature and which illustrate projects intended to protect and restore ecosystems. Peter specializes in capturing candid moments of wildlife behavior in the Western United States and abroad. His goal is to convey the beauty of all species while illustrating the need to protect and restore wildlife habitat. His award-winning work can be found in periodicals and online magazines. Our third panelist is Victoria Samuel. She is a Colorado native as well as a wildlife and land conservationist. Her goals include raising awareness of environmental and wildlife issues through imagery and stories. Her image collections focus on many North American species, from birds to bears. She is a contributor to her city's Open Space Advisory Board and a volunteer trail steward, as well as a volunteer with the Highline Canal Conservancy. Her work is used in naturalist education, as well as on the Aurora TV channel to enhance community connections with nature. Victoria's goal is to capture meaningful and powerful images that connect people with wildlife and wildlands. Finally, we have Michael Madrid. He enjoys spending his free time making photographs of Colorado's magnificent and diverse environment and its wild inhabitants, noting that he captures and shares images of Colorado feathers, flowers, fur, and the environment. As a professional photojournalist, Michael has worked for USA Today since 1996 and currently is the International Sports Director for USA Today Sports Images. His assignments have taken him across the country and around the globe to natural disasters, international news events, the Olympic Games, and other sporting events. He believes this job is almost too much fun to be called work and enjoys sharing moments of time, place, and emotion with readers and viewers wherever they may be. Madrid is based in Colorado. So let's give them a warm welcome. And as we invite Dawn to share.
Morning, everybody. Apparently I'm a maven. I didn't know that's a term I've never heard described when I've been introduced. So thank you for coming today. I have the privilege of being your opening presenter. As Samuel mentioned, I do live in Estes Park, Colorado, so I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about my life up there. I do travel pretty extensively outside of Colorado, but sometimes our backyards are some of our best places to find the best stories. And I am pretty lucky. I do have elk right outside my door, literally. Just this morning, I actually was running a little bit late to get here because of an elk jam in Estes Park. So it is a very unique place to live. So I am going to talk about my wildlife with wildlife in Rocky Mountain National Park and the surrounding area. So a couple statistics for you. Did you know there are more than 280 species of birds in Rocky Mountain National Park? And we actually do get quite a few that come through when they come through the Continental Divide, both on the spring migration and the fall migration. We're actually a big stopover point, so we get a lot of really kind of off the beaten path type birds, which is a lot of fun. Rocky Mountain National Park has the highest elevation continuously paved road, which goes up above 12,000 feet. So we have access to wildlife that most places in this country you just cannot get to. There are more than 70 moose in Rocky Mountain National Park. I actually wrote several years ago, I wrote an article about moving to Colorado from New Jersey, where obviously we don't have moose out there. But now I live in a county that has moose, and it was just pretty amazing to think that I could actually drive down the road 5 minutes and see a moose. There are only about 30 black bears and no grizzly bears in the park. So it can be pretty rare to see a black bear. This is actually a pretty good time of year just because they're going through their hyperphagia, which is them bulking up. They have to eat about 20,000 calories a day to survive the winter, for the winter hibernation. And we have about 600 to 800 elk in Estes Valley and the park in the wintertime. As I mentioned, I live off of a golf course up there, and they use that area. This time of year, they're going through their rut, so we hear them out there. We hear them bugling all night long. We hear them fighting. They tore a fence apart outside our front door last week. So it's kind of a catch-22. It's fun to watch them, but it can be, you have to kind of watch where you go sometimes. And Rocky has more than 350 sheep. This is a bighorn sheep with Long's Peak in the background up on Trail Ridge Road on the tundra. There are no mountain goats in the park. We do have mountain goats in Colorado, but there are none in the park. If you see them there, I actually advise you not to tell anybody because the park doesn't want them there, and they will nicely ask them to leave. I won't go into details about what that means. So, sorry. So a little about me. This is me. I'm out on the trail for Lake Irene in Rocky Mountain National Park. The park does expand from 14,259 feet at the top of Long's Peak down to about 8,000 feet just outside of Estes Park. So we have a very, very wide diversity in elevations, which means we also have a big diversity in habitats and ecosystems, and therefore the wildlife is pretty diverse as well, which is just amazing. As somebody that's originally from New Jersey, I grew up at probably about 20 feet of elevation, and I now live at 7,500 feet. So it's just an amazing place to be. I did study communications, so much like many of you, I studied communications back in New Jersey. I came out here in 1997 looking at going to graduate school and fell in love with the state, decided that I would move here, but finished my graduate studies back in Philadelphia, finished that up, and within months I was actually living here in Colorado. So like a lot of people in Colorado, we fall in love with it, we move out here, and then we complain about how crowded it's getting. So that's kind of where I am today. I spent about 20 years in corporate marketing jobs, everything from promotions to advertising to writing, script writing. I've done all kinds of TV educational program producing, but I always felt like I was that one that was always kind of looking out the window, telling people about the crow's nest that was literally outside of a conference room and watching the babies grow up. I knew I wanted to be outside. So after a couple of really difficult years, personally, I decided that I was going to leave all of that behind, including the good paycheck, and decided that I was going to follow my passions. And I do that. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. So I feel pretty lucky that I've been able to do that. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but I don't have to sit in a desk every day. I get to go outside every day, and that's just an absolutely amazing thing. So this is me. I do get down and dirty. These waders, recently I fell in the Colorado River wearing these waders, lost some camera gear because of it, but I was going after that right photo, and sometimes that's what kind of happens, so still waiting on getting that back. But you know, I do really like to be involved in my photography, not be a part of the story, but to be involved in it. And that means getting down at eye level with an animal, connecting with them. And if it's a small animal, like in this case, this was down on the Gulf Coast. I was photographing some birds down there. I get down in the sand and actually get at eye level with them. And it just gives a much more intimate perspective on what they're doing and how you can connect with that animal. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that I've experienced. As I mentioned, I live in Estes Park. I'm in Rocky Mountain National Park probably at least 4 or 5 days a week. If I'm not in the park, I'm looking for something around town. I spend most of my mornings that way, and then the rest of the day I spend at my desk, because that was one of the things I was asked to talk about was how do you make a living doing this? And you still make your living at the desk. So you have to find that balance between them. But as I mentioned, my passion is being outdoors. My passion is finding those stories. So this is a bull elk up in Rocky Mountain National Park in the middle of the fall rut, actually probably right about this time of year. And this is one of those stories, I get a lot of questions about, have I ever been charged by animals? Have I ever been in a situation where animals I've been in a precarious situation around animals? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you're going to be in the outdoors, it does happen. I do my best to try to prevent it. On occasion, things just kind of unexpectedly kind of come up out of the blue. And there are certainly times where I get so wrapped up in the excitement of what I'm doing that I don't pay attention to what's kind of going on around me. And that was kind of the situation with this bull elk. There was a harem of cows, maybe about 20, that he was kind of corralling. And I saw them moving, I saw them kind of coming towards me, and I decided to use a fairly large boulder, probably about the same height as me, to kind of hide behind, and I could watch them. What I didn't realize was that because I was hiding behind this rock, I did not see the harem split. Half of them wound up coming up behind me, and within, and it was not this photo, I'll tell you in a second, but the harem actually split, came around the rock on both sides, and I'm now on the one side of the end side of the boulder. I've got half this group behind me and half in front of me. And as I'm watching them, I'm not worried about the cows. I'm worried about this guy seeing me. He has very sharp antlers. Bull elk in the middle of the rut can certainly have a lot of testosterone going through them, and I just didn't want to startle him. The camera went down. I had a phone in my pocket. It never came out. I have absolutely no photos of this experience. He literally probably walked about as close as the front of this computer to me, walked right in front of the rock. And please don't share any of this information with rangers in the park because they would have my head. But he walked right in front of me, and to see those animals with the muscles they have and the antlers, and it's an amazing, almost primal feeling that you get to have. And that's what I get to do every day. The other end of the spectrum are the elk calves. This calf was actually born right outside our door this spring. So I want to say like the first week of June, right around June 4th. Came out, walked my dog, and did not see the cow. This was the first time. We've had calves born in our neighborhood before, but this was the first time it had actually happened right outside the front door. And came outside, didn't think to look, and next thing I know, I hear from across the yard, lady, watch out. And I turn around, and there's this cow elk just charging towards me. Quickly grab my dog. We run up the stairs, back up to our front door. And I managed, and of course, the first thing I'm thinking of is get the dog in the house, get the dog safe. Second thing I'm thinking of is where's my camera? So I go and grab my camera, and I managed to catch these newborn photos of this baby elk calf, which was just so adorable to watch it all kind of wobbly, and it still was very, very wet from being born the night before. Another big mammal, I've mentioned already, another big mammal we have is moose. And so in Colorado, there's actually about 3,000 moose. They've been reintroduced to the state back in 1978 and 91. Between 78 and 91, there were quite a few moose reintroduced. We have a lot of really, really good habitat here for moose, so they've done well, and we now have about 3,000 within the state. In the park, my estimate is about 70, based on where I see them, how often I see them, and where, if I see one here and I don't see it another place, and I kind of calculate those out. Completely an estimate. Park estimates there's 40 to 60 just on the west side, so we've been seeing more and more on the east side. This happens to be up on the north side of the park, just outside of Rocky Mountain National Park in the northern section of Colorado. But this is, sometimes as a wildlife photographer, we want those experiences where it's just us and the animal. I was just telling them that I just came back from the San Juan Mountains down in southern Colorado, and you could see 40, 50 people lined up taking the same photograph. As somebody that's selling photographs, that doesn't really work really well. If I'm trying to sell a photograph, I don't want to have, maybe half of those other people are selling them as well. It just doesn't work well from a business perspective. So I'm always trying to find some of those situations where it can be me and the animal, and I can capture that story of the animal. So the first week of September, moose shed the velvet from their antlers, with the largest bulls going first. So I had been watching this bull all summer. It was in a location that there's some trails around there, and it's wilderness, so you can kind of get away from people. You can get off the road and just disappear from traffic and things. So, and I managed to find him one morning. It was beautiful light, absolutely nice, crisp, cool morning, and he hadn't shed yet. And there were 7 of them out in this willow park, and he hadn't shed the velvet yet, but there was just a little bit of blood starting. So velvet is very vascular. It's basically the nutrients to help the antlers grow. And once the antlers are at their largest, the velvet comes off. And they describe it as dreadlocks, and that's really what it looks like when it starts stringing down. And this guy had just started shedding, and I think I saw him first maybe like 6:30 in the morning. By 9:30, he was almost done shedding, and I captured the whole sequence. Just me, him, and the other cows that had no interest in him yet. So again, it was a very, very interesting moment that I had, just he and I, to kind of capture those special opportunities. Pikas. Has anybody seen a pika in here? We have a few hands up. These are, most people, when I guide in the park, most people are like, oh, those are those little mice running around. I'm like, no, they're actually not mice. They're actually part of the rabbit family. And if you look at them, this picture doesn't really show it, but if you look at them, they have long front teeth that need to be worn away, that continue to keep growing, so they need to be worn away. They have back feet that look very much like rabbits. And if you look at their ears, and you can see that in this photo, they're curved, kind of a little bit longer, curved like a rabbit's ear. And they have a very high-pitched squeak it's kind of a call, like a safety call. But they spend the whole summer gathering plants and flowers, and because they don't hibernate. These animals are actually pretty interesting animals in that they don't hibernate, yet they live above tree line, and they survive these really cold Colorado winters in the wind and the snow just by off of these what they call caches or hay piles of food that they gather all summer long and then dry out, and they feed on those in the wintertime. So a couple of summers ago, I have a really nice spot to photograph pikas, and I was sitting on a boulder, and I've got pikas kind of running around in all different areas. They get pretty curious about you after you sit there for a while with them, and I'm just letting them do their thing, and all of a sudden I see one kind of run behind me, and I turn around, and I didn't realize I was on the edge of the boulder, and I roll off, hit my head, crack a rib, but the priority, camera was good. The camera was fine, nothing happened to the camera, so those are kind of the experiences that we tend to have while we're in the outdoors. This was actually kind of a similar situation with the pikas. So this is kind of that habitat that they're on. This is up on the tundra, real distant backgrounds with the mountains. And a lot of times, like I said, they're curious. A lot of times they'll just kind of pop up out of nowhere. You're kind of like, what are you doing over there? So I threw that one in just to kind of show that. Abert squirrels. This is, I get a lot of questions. I've seen it happen where I'm out with my 500 millimeter lens. I'll throw a teleconverter on it, which is basically an extender that gets me up to 700 millimeters. And I enjoy photographing squirrels. If you ever want to learn wildlife photography, try photographing squirrels. They're actually pretty hard. They move around a lot. They can be shy. They're very skittish. But when you get one that's willing to be photographed, they do a lot of really silly things. And they're everywhere. That's the other thing. Kind of like birds, you have squirrels everywhere. So they're a really good subject to practice wildlife photography. This is an Abert squirrel, which happens to be a pretty elusive squirrel here in Colorado. We have, you can see them in ponderosa forests in the west, but in Colorado we have a kind of a subspecies of them that have a black coat. Most of them are gray. We have a black-coated Abert squirrel here. And again, similar to a lot of things, this is not something I see in New Jersey. I had been looking for Abert squirrels for years, and all of a sudden I had one run across the road in front of me, of all places in a campground. So always keep your eye out. If you want to photograph animals, always keep your eye out for some of those rare opportunities. I'm going to go back to moose for a second. And I'll tell you this one last story. I have this one and one other story, and then I'll wrap it up for you today. So moose are in their rut season right now, just like elk. But elk, if you've ever seen an elk rut, elk bugle, they're very animated, they're very, some people would almost describe obnoxious. They chase the cows around, they bugle a lot, they make a lot of noise, they fight a lot with each other. Moose, on the other hand, which are also part of the deer family, a little bit larger than elk, are they're actually very tender during their mating season. This bull moose I had been following one summer, again, kind of watching what he was doing, and he actually paired up with a cow. And I was on a trail and happened to see them go through their whole, I don't want to call it almost a mating process, but almost like a date. It was very much where like he would woo her, he would kind of grunt and groan a little bit, he would make a wallow, which is basically they pee and then they roll around and it's kind of gross, but it's like a moose cologne, it's kind of crazy. And then she came over and then she went in the wallow and rolled around in it, and then they started kind of rubbing on each other a little bit, and the whole time there's a calf off to the side, and the calf's like, I don't know what the heck is going on here, but I'm just gonna kind of stay out of the way. But again, one of those intimate moments on a trail, just me and the moose, and those are those opportunities that I'm always trying to look for. And the final quick story that I'll give you is this just happened last week. This isn't the best photo in the world. So most of you can probably see the deer that's in here. This is a deer fawn. He's getting pretty big. Can you guys see the turkeys back in the trees? I see a few people nodding their heads. The fawn was actually chasing them around. He was playing with them. It was the craziest little thing. And these are those opportunistic things that kind of come along. I happened to be driving along a road, saw this happening. I always have my camera on the side of me, on the front seat. So my message is always have a camera with you. If you want to photograph wildlife, you can't give direction to animals. They're going to do what they want to do. You really want to capture that. You don't want to interfere with what they are doing on a daily basis. So always have that camera with you. The best camera you have is the one you do have with you. And even in some situations, a cell phone will work as well. So I'll run through real quick. Just a couple quick tips for if you want to get into wildlife photography. These are some ideas around storytelling. I'm assuming a lot of the students in here are probably communications majors, might want to go into news reporting or something. So pre-visualize your photo. What do you want to photograph? Where will you find it? What will affect the photo you envision? Think of something different, a different place, a different animal, a different behavior, a different experience. Take the ordinary and make it extraordinary, and never, never give up on it. So that was everything I have for you today. This is, if you want to take a screenshot, this is my contact information, and I am going to pass it over to Peter, who is going to take you to the other side of the world now. So, thank you.
Let's see here. Next slide. Okay, figure out how to work there we go. Okay. Okay, hi everybody. My name's Peter Ismert, and currently I live in Denver, Colorado, and I am also a CSU alumni back in the mid-'80s or so, and I graduated from the agronomy department, so I have a science degree, and in my bio that Samuel read off earlier, he says I'm an environmental scientist, so I work for the Environmental Protection Agency in Denver, and I'm an environmental scientist there, and I do a lot of water quality work with a lot of watershed restoration activities and things like that. So with my photography as well, it kind of mixes fairly well. You don't have to be a scientist to be a wildlife photographer, but it does give me insight into wildlife conservation efforts to help promote conservation through wildlife photography, called conservation photography. So what I'm going to talk about today is a wild dog's life with a story and images of the painted wolf, with images taken from South Luangwa National Park in Zambia and also from around the Okavango Delta in Botswana. So that's where we're going to go this afternoon, or this morning. So conservation photography definitely can play a huge role in protection of wild dogs in southern Africa. Although I've contributed to conservation photography through various channels, I still hope to learn more about it to be able to tell future intriguing stories. So let's get going here. So this is wild dog. Strongholds for wild dogs are in Zambia and Botswana, among other places in southern Africa. But there's not as many as there used to be, obviously. Maybe a dozen packs still exist in the South Luangwa National Park ecosystem area, but there's only a few hundred packs in all of southern Africa these days. The wild dog range has pretty much shrunken down to about 10% of its original size from when it was an undisturbed area in all of southern Africa. So let's get started here with a sort of a day in the life of wild dogs. I kind of have some pictures here that kind of show the different habits and their behaviors through the course of a day. So let's start the day here pretty much mid-morning. Either the adult dogs are either in the shade napping or they're still out hunting. And this picture here was taken in Botswana, where our guides knew where the wild dogs were denning and the puppies were coming out. So we had some really great guides there, and we would pull up pretty far away from the dens just to not disturb the dens at all. But we came to this one location. There was no puppies out there. We saw some adults in the trees. And one of the better wildlife moments I've ever had is when we were just waiting there and waiting. And finally, the puppies just poured out of the den because they knew something was going on outside, or they heard a signal from one of the adult dogs. So they poured out of the den and just sort of relaxed and slept and played kind of around the den area there. It was a really incredible morning. So, of course, the den time is play time. The dogs just love to play. So we got some great photographs of the dogs playing throughout that whole morning. But play is definitely important because it teaches wild dogs their role in the pack and also their role in the hunts as well. So it's a very important activity that the dogs do this. And many of these pups will just stay with the pack through their entire lives. They won't branch off to a new pack. And I think there was maybe 10, 12 pups in this pack here. There's a good chance that one or two of them will become the alpha female and the alpha male of the pack when they grow up. Just another shot of one of the puppies. This is from a different den, and the puppies were a little bit older, and they get more curious as they get older, and they start exploring. Again, we were parked pretty far from the den, but their curiosity just brings them to the safari vehicle. And fortunately, in this photograph, that's not the den, but we parked as low as we could to get sort of an eye-level shot of the wild dogs. And fortunately, there was a little mound that the puppies came over to us and would sort of pose on the mound for us. Here's another one of some younger puppies, kind of a similar situation at a different den as well. Just came right over to the vehicle. We were down low, and they got on a little mound and mixed for great photographs. So adult wild dogs spend most of their day just like this, in a big heap of dog. So they're always bobbing their heads up and down. At every little sound, one or two of them will bob their head up, look around to make sure there's no trouble coming. And they sort of seem to take turns doing that. So you kind of look to make photographs like this. You look around and see which ones are going to bob their heads up next and take a quick photograph before they put their heads back down. And you can see those ears, and they can pretty much hear anything out there. So when the wild dog adults do find time that it's time to go hunt, usually in the late evening when the sun starts to get low, cools off a little bit, first thing they do is socialize just like this. A lot of mouth touching. They have a pretty complex communication systems, and I think there's at least 18 different vocalizations that they've identified. Maybe there's more that provide cues to the other dogs to do certain things and what's going on. But face touching is pretty normal, as you can see in our own dogs these days. So in this shot, that's the female alpha female there out front, and she's the one that says, okay, it's time to go hunt, enough socializing. So off she starts going, and just like that, the others just know exactly what's going on. But in this photograph, you can see she is very pregnant. And this was in May in South Luangwa in Zambia. And so she still is leading the pack off into the hunts, even like that, but she wasn't very fast. And so they tend to start denning right about then. So I'm not sure what was on her mind. Maybe she was going to go look for a den for herself or something, but she led the pack off and off to the hunt in this situation. And so we saw her run, and she's not very fast. So I think she just leads them off, and then she goes rest and waits for the rest to hunt and bring her food until she starts denning. So typically, they will hunt from the roads a lot. That's why it's somewhat easy to find them, because they like the roads. It provides a place for them to run. It's quieter maybe a little bit, and they can kind of hide behind the shrubbery along the roads, and so their prey can't see them that easily. So they'll typically start along the roads, and it's you'll come across wild dogs when you're in the parks, and these little basically like little jeep roads. There's always one dog that will stay back with the puppies if they have a den going on. So one or two will always stay back with the puppies, but pretty much to guard them and just take care of them, keep them out of trouble. And so the dogs are always looking for opportunities when they're hunting. As you can see, this one's walking down a road, and it stops and listens, smells constantly, looking around to see if there's anything there for them to hunt. And also obviously also for dangers. The biggest threat to wild dogs these days is probably humans, both due to poaching and habitat loss. Poaching occurs pretty much when there's a lot of snaring activity occurs, and even in national parks where they're not really safe, they'll step in snares, and that's it for them. And then, of course, habitat destruction and our use of land has really pinched the wild dog habitat down to the national parks and some conservation areas that still can support them throughout southern Africa. Let's see. Yeah, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about, so it's not all about wild dogs, a little bit about some of their threats. Their number one nemesis is the spotted hyena down there, of course. Predators don't get along with each other very well in Africa. So especially with the spotted hyena, they're constantly following dog packs to steal their food when they make a kill. They would challenge the whole dog pack and possibly kill wild dogs as well. So they're not afraid of that. Wild dogs can maybe run one off, but if there's a few of them, the wild dogs are definitely in trouble. So they're probably the number one nemesis of a wild dog pack. And then, of course, there's the lions, and they're probably the number one threat to the wild dogs in the natural world. They, of course, will steal their food as well. And it's not uncommon for a female lion by herself or a male lion by himself to challenge a whole pack, scare them all off, and steal their kill, and try to kill any dogs at the same time, because predators have their own territories, and they don't want other predators in their territory. So wild dogs and lions definitely don't get along very well. Especially the big male lions, they can take on a whole pack easily. And their number one inconvenience maybe is the elephant. Here's kind of an abstract picture of an elephant. They don't kill each other or anything, but the elephants definitely like to chase off wild dogs from their areas, disturb the dens. The dogs running around elephants trying to get them to do something. So they're kind of like the number one nemesis of a wild dog pack. And then lastly is leopards. Leopards are pretty nocturnal, and wild dogs sleep at night because they don't have the eyes of a leopard. So leopards can be dangerous to wild dogs. If they come across a dog one-on-one, they wouldn't hesitate to try to kill it. Wild dogs would probably try to run off leopards as a pack as well, but at night, the leopard definitely has the advantage. So let's talk a little bit about the food of the wild dog. Well, a Cape buffalo is definitely not the food of a wild dog. Wild dogs would have a hard time taking down a Cape buffalo, so I just wanted to put this picture up there. Something that they probably pretty much would stay away from, because Cape buffalo are one of the most feared animals down there in southern Africa. However, the puku is an antelope found in Zambia and in other places in Botswana in southern Africa. This is one of their favorite foods to hunt. It's a puku. You can't really see it there, but it looks similar to an impala. And here's an impala. Although they're much faster than a puku, and they can jump like this, wild dogs love impala as well as some of their favorite food that they go after, just because there's so many of them as well. So the hunt. The hunt starts with, like I said before, with cues from the alpha male or the alpha female. They hunt as a pack. They start off with a pack, like I said, on a road. And this is kind of how they look when they hunt. They're just coming down. They're all looking around. These ones have their ears back, so they're not listening that well at the moment for some reason. And their hunts could easily cover about 20 miles between the chase, the search, and the chase, and the back to the den. It's definitely kind of the power of the pack is how the wild dogs survive. So when they do come across their prey like this, it's chaos, and it's hard to figure out what are they doing. So it's pretty much every wild dog for itself, it seems like. So it sort of seems like how they hunt, but they sort of, in a way, flank their prey, and they have some coordination to it, but it's pretty chaotic. They don't hunt like lions, and they don't hunt like cheetahs or leopards, where it's more of a quick situation. Sometimes it takes them a little while. Their specialty is they're fast, so they can chase these animals, but they sort of wear them down and wait for a mistake to happen, and then maybe they can catch one. So often the prey will be, like I just said, will be slowed, or one wild dog will grab one and slow it down. And once the rest of the pack sees that, they come over to help finish off the situation. And it's not uncommon for them to get two antelope, pukus at the same time. And so the pack has double duty to take care of both of those animals. And then they eat as fast as possible before the lions and the hyenas come over. So whenever you see a wild dog kill, it's about 10 minutes and the animal's gone. It's pretty crazy. So after the kill, they run back to the den to feed everyone else that did not come out for the hunt, which is usually the puppies and a couple more that stayed back at the den to watch the puppies. And so how they carry their food, they're not carrying it in their mouth, it's in their stomachs. So that's the most efficient way to get it back to the den without others seeing that they're carrying good food. Plus, it's easier just to run with the food in their stomachs. So when they get to the den, the puppies, there's a lot of face touching. The puppies stimulate the regurgitation stimulates reflex from the adults to regurgitate the food, and that's how the puppies and whoever's there eats. Puppies finally get some food, and they love it. They run around with it and try to keep it from the other puppies initially. Everyone's happy back after eating. They're licking each other. There's usually lots of food all over them. And even the little runt gets fed. So wild dogs are the kind of the most gentle of all canines, or least aggressive. They make sure that the runts get fed. Any wild dog that's sick, that wasn't able to hunt, gets fed. The older ones that can't hunt get fed. Injured get fed. So they all take care of each other. So just a little more about conservation photography. I'll let you read that there. I encourage any of you that are out there that are leaning toward wildlife photography to consider conservation photography as well, and how that might fit into your current work that you're doing. There are many practicing conservation photographers out there. In a way, all of us are. But as more environmental issues keep cropping up, more photographers are going to be needed over and over to kind of help tell the conservation stories and promote conservation. So I just want to say thanks for coming, and I appreciate being asked to be on this panel, and the support from the foundation is to have this event. So thanks a lot.
Hi everyone, my name is Vicki. My photography business, Victoria Raphaela Photography. I can tell you a little bit about myself, but my career has almost nothing to do with my passion for photography. My journey came as a move in my life to seek spiritual wellness, and it has certainly taken me there. I have a connection to wildlife. I always have since Wild Kingdom, Sunday nights, 6 o'clock. All right, we need to make up some time here, so I'm just going to kind of close it. My passion, or go quickly, my passion is the ethics of photography. Some animals will let you get close, but that doesn't mean you should get close. I pride myself, maybe pride's not the good word, but I like the idea that I can read animals pretty well. Kind of like people, they let you know when you're overdoing it or when you need to back off, and so just quickly on this image, this is an image that I caught last year, last rut, so not this past one, but 2021, and most of the photographers followed. This bull had a harem that he lost right before this. They went running down to this other bull, and I followed this bull. And I was very lucky. It's not likely or it's not common to see a bull wallow, but I got a great shot of him wallowing. This is a grizzly bear. Colorado doesn't have grizzly bears. I generally spend my time in Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. This grizzly bear is from Yellowstone National Park. It's kind of an interesting situation there. The sows will put themselves near the road when they come out in the spring with their cubs because they've figured out that that makes a safe situation where the boar, the male bear, will tend to not come in and kill the babies, because what they'd like to do is bring the female back into estrus. In this particular bear, none of these three, this was 4 years ago, none of these three survived. Grizzly bears have very slow reproductive rates. We're hoping that next spring she comes out with some more cubs. Great gray owls are something that I'm passionate about as well. As many of us have mentioned, habitat loss is a big issue, and great gray owls, mostly this great gray owl I got in Montana. I hear Colorado has some, but I haven't found them yet. Keep looking for them. This is an eagle's nest in Montana that resides on a rancher's property. He's happy to have them there. Of course, eagles, bald eagles, are federally protected, but many of the ranchers understand sustainability and conservation of animal species, and he allows us to watch this bald eagle's nest from his property. We're always very quiet. I would stress that part of the ethics of wildlife photography is that you mimic or what you see in nature. Nature's very quiet, and so we need to be very quiet as well and respect the animal's situation. This is the same bald eagle's nest. She figured out that there was some young ground squirrels down below, and she picked them off one by one. This is a pine marten, hard species to get an image of. Got lucky that day, and that was 4 years ago, and I haven't seen one since. So one of the things with photography is to take opportunity, because you never know when it's going to happen again. I'm seeking that out. This is a bull elk from Rocky Mountain National Park as well. Dawn and I have that in common, although her concentration is much more faceted. I was lucky to see this guy late one evening. It's very difficult to shoot after you lose your light. Light is really important with photography, and was happy to see that I got this image when I got home. This is the greater sage grouse. This is an example of conservation of a species. I'm working with the Sage Grouse Initiative to lend them images. You can Google that. It's a pretty cool situation. They work with ranchers and such to maintain habitat. This is one of the most interesting birds I've ever seen. This is the male of the species during their mating season, putting on a little show for the females. This is mountain goats. In this situation, what I was striving to do was get a nice deep background to exemplify where they live. They're up on high mountain passes, navigating the rocks. This is a mule deer. In this situation, all I wanted to mention was that I had anticipated this mule deer's path. I waited about 45 minutes, and certainly he came, and then I got this shot and left him alone to his day. This shot is a river otter. I'm kind of all over the place with sharing my species. These are all North American animals. I was sitting one day in Yellowstone and I heard this gloop in the river, and I looked up and saw this little tail. So I moved ahead downriver and sat on the ground and waited for it to come. It took a long time and I figured I had missed it. But then there it was, and it's my very first river otter. It was, I'm always seeking to have a spiritual connection with the animals. I think a lot of us have said that. I feel like it's a situation where I'm being granted audience with them, and I never want to disrespect that opportunity. Bighorn sheep. These guys were watching me. It was just about to begin rut, and they were acting up with one another. They're very social animals, especially the males, just about at the beginning of the rut. And so this was kind of a fun image. I got this in Montana. This is a well-known elk that a lot of us have seen maybe online on social media lately. He lived to about 12 years old in Rocky Mountain National Park and succumbed last year. 12 years for an elk's pretty old. This is another image of him. This was the year of the fires, and so there was great color in backgrounds. I always try to pay attention to backgrounds. It helps exemplify the story for the animal. And a white-tailed deer in velvet. Don kind of explained what the velvet is in terms of growing those antlers. This is a story, another rancher story. This is a hard bird to capture. It is the northern harrier. This is the male northern harrier, even harder. They call him the ghost for a reason. Very difficult to find or see or even capture with a camera. This was a nesting pair. Males will have and sustain or support up to 5 nests. In this particular case, he had 2 in the middle of a rancher's field that had lain fallow for a while. He came and asked us what we were doing on his dirt road, and we talked about what we were seeing. He had no idea. He used to let his dog run loose in all those fields, and at the moment we talked to him about this situation, he decided that he would probably support that animal, and it's always good when you can connect with at least one person, and then maybe that person can connect with another. So this is the female. She's bringing, of course, nesting material back to the nest. I don't know if anybody knew. It's a very interesting bird. They nest on the ground. It's kind of cool. This is a coyote, kind of an interesting looking coyote. This is a city coyote. People might think, oh, it has mange. Mange is a parasite. This coyote is actually suffering from secondhand poisoning. This is a situation that occurs in city situations where people are using rodenticide, and the coyote is eating the dead rodents. So secondhand poisoning can be quite the issue. Another great gray owl. Again, I was paying attention to the background here. It was a great foggy day in Montana, and this owl graced us with his presence. This is a black bear. I took this also in Yellowstone. Same thing as the grizzly bears. They have figured out that if they put themselves in proximity to the roads and the people, they can better take care of their babies. It works pretty well for them. This is one of her babies. They were having a good old time on these branches, and this is a lucky shot. I'll probably never get this shot again, and I'm glad I was there. Moose talked a little bit about Dawn. No, Dawn talked a little bit about Moose. And this is a moose who's displaying the Flaмен's response. I'm not even sure if I've ever said that word right. So it was an interesting opportunity to also capture all the detail. He had recently rubbed, so that was kind of a fun image. Background again. This is a sandhill crane. I'm always impressed by animals and their ability to survive, and in and of itself has encouraged my ability, or I'm looking at my own wellness and my own ability to survive. These sandhills scrape together this mud pile in the middle of a lake, a shallow lake. And then this is one of the other, I'm not sure if it's the male or the female, just laying there. They will lay there motionless and protect that egg for long, long periods of time. They usually have 1 to 2 colts. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stick around for the hatching. This was an unexpected visit. While we were taking pictures of those great gray owls, this coyote wandered around the corner. It's always fun to be shooting one species and another one shows up. Of course, you should never let your target, your goal species, you should never lose sight of that, but it was fun to snap a couple shots of him. Little baby porcupine. Also a first for me. No, they do not shoot their quills. I always want to say that to people, but it was a fun image, again, looking at background, kind of wanting to capture it in the snow. And this is going to be an example of ethical photography here. This is the American badger. He was spending time on a hill where there was a lot of ground squirrels, digging out the holes and getting a little sustenance. For a while, everything was good until people started getting too close, too loud, too disruptive, and then he went into this. A lot of people didn't understand what was going on. They thought he was acting funny. This is him acting out, suggesting that I would just like you guys to leave. This is getting too far. I quickly packed up my gear and left. Another first for me. This was a well-known wolf in Yellowstone. She's the last surviving alpha of the Lamar Canyon pack. I was lucky enough to see her just before the end of her life. It seems like she was looking at me. I'm just going to go with that. But actually, she was looking at a wolf that was behind me way off in the meadow. She had gone down to a carcass, snagged a couple bones, and was taking it back up to the den. I was hoping this image would do well on this screen. So this was really interesting in Yellowstone. I noticed this grizzly bear up on a mount running around kind of hazardly. What is he doing? So we watched him for a good 30, 45 minutes. It may be a female, actually. I'm not too sure. I didn't get close enough to check. She was chasing down bison calves. I will tell you, in this case, this is a composite. The scene was so wide, I had to sort of cut images together to create this. She was not successful. The female bison got between her and the grizzly, and then when the grizzly wasn't looking, they took off. So that was good for me, although I know the grizzly had to eat, and I believe he was successful the next day. One of the things I like to do in Colorado, I know people can capture their hummingbirds off their back porch, but I like to go out into the wild. It's, again, a way for me to become spiritual with the surroundings. This is down in Crested Butte. There are lots of wildflowers down there in the summer. And I like to just go and get up crack of dawn, take my gear, go out in the middle of a field, or a meadow, I should say, and just start watching the hummingbirds. It is crazy how fast they are. And one of these shots necessitates a lot of focus and concentration. These are a few things that I think are important in terms of wildlife photography. You really need to be ready, you need to be prepared, you need to be okay with the conditions that could exist anywhere from being too hot to too cold. All of those things necessitate getting that, or assist in getting that image. One of the biggest things for me, though, is the respect factor. I really feel like in today's age with social media, people want to just get the shot and share it online and have maybe little disregard for the animal, but it's really important to me to have regard for the animal because, after all, my goal is, like so many of these photographers, conservation photography. I would like to connect you, the viewer, with the animal, but not at the animal's behest. All right, little bear there for you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for listening.
I was going to suggest I could do mine at lunch, during the lunch break. Okay. All right. Morning, everybody. As you, from the introduction, if you read the bio, this is sort of a free time activity for me that I incredibly enjoy. And being able to live in such an awesome place where the wildlife is so abundant and so accessible is really a treat. And so I enjoy photographing all the different kinds of wildlife and have done so for years, the moose and the elk and the pikas and the hummingbirds and waterfowl and so forth. But I think I'm going to focus on some raptors today. This is sort of a classic Colorado raptor picture, Long's Peak in the background. The nest that they're in actually blew down, way down into the tree about 4 years ago. And so this picture will never happen again. couple of main things about doing wildlife photography, especially with raptors, is long lenses, super telephoto lenses. I work with mostly an 800 millimeter lens with a 1.25 teleconverter on it. And I've never been real keen on teleconverters because they're never as sharp, but I was amazed. This particular lens came with a converter, made from the same glass, and has the same serial number. And so once one of my friends at Nikon Professional Services showed me how to fine-tune the focus, I've never taken the converter off again. So basically I shoot at 1,000 millimeters, f7.1. So I want to talk a little bit about first some burrowing owls, actually where I met Peter at this burrow a number of years ago, and their habits. They're amazing little creatures. They're about 9 inches tall, maybe about 6 inches body, and 2.5 or 3 inch legs. So the whole bird's about that big. The wingspan's about 20 inches. The sexes are both the same size, which is unusual in the raptor world. The females are almost always larger and more powerful, but in the burrowing owls, they're the same. They usually make use of prairie dog burrows. They can do their own, but they're opportunistic. Usually will use burrows that they can find. Here the male is giving a piece of dung to the female as a gift. They line the bottom of their nest, their burrow, with the dung so that it attracts the dung beetles, which is what they eat. So it's kind of 2 for 1. It's unusual, but it's part of what their behavior is. And they preen just like any other birds and so forth. They survey their territory. This is, a 9-inch bird sitting on top of a 2-foot little piece of sagebrush to get a better look at what's going on. They're very, very animated and incredibly interesting to watch. Their behavior. They're little acrobats on the wing. It's amazing to watch them change direction in flight and swoop down and snag a bug that then they bring back to their young, feed them to the young. So with both parents are basically nonstop hunting for food. This is a youngster, not old enough to fly yet. Incoming with the lunch delivery. The antics are really hilarious, and they're mimicking their adults to learn how to fly. And unfortunately, this particular burrow was very, very close, maybe 30 to 40 feet from a walking trail. And a lot of the hikers and leisure walkers were out there with their cell phones trying to make pictures of the birds. And so the Fort Collins wildlife folks had to put up a sign to keep people back from to not go out there with their cell phones. Respecting their distance is extremely important for them to just be able to carry on. Lots of feeding. And when you have 7 mouths to feed, your work is never done. I want to talk a little bit about eastern screech owl. This rufous owl, a local bird authority told me that this is only the 4th on record in Fort Collins area, since they've been keeping track for a couple hundred years. It's an eastern screech owl, but it's just a pigment it makes it rufous. They're about 6 inches tall, wingspan of 18 to 24 inches. They only weigh, mere ounces. Sort of a misnomer is that they don't screech, even though they're called screech owls. They whinny, they chatter a little bit, like a trill. Their call is not, here's yawning here. The call is nothing like a screech. So I'm not sure how they ever got that name, but they definitely don't screech. So following these birds in different times of year, different seasons, over the course of since 2017, and one year it didn't actually use the roost. It wasn't there all year long. And this special little bird, I don't, because enough people know where it is or roughly where it is. It's a treat to show these because I never post them to social media because I don't want them to be overrun with looky-loos and people trying to make pictures without telephoto lenses and too many bird watchers to disturb it. It's a fresh morning after a snow is a surefire time to see it warming itself in the sun and in the morning light. He's always got his eye on me, but he never crawls back in the hole or scurries away or flies away or anything else. So sort of, maybe I'm wishful thinking, but I'm fairly confident that it's not too bothered by my presence. And then eastern screech owls are just the gray common ones. They are very common in the area. There's like 4 or 5 parks that have them. This is a mother looking out from the nesting cavity, and she jumped out and up popped a couple of babies. These owlets are about 2 weeks old. Of course, she's not very far. She's in a tree across the path, right? And the nest is right up above a walking trail. So she's staying close to keep an eye on them. Easy to see. This is actually a gray screech owl using the same roosting hole as the red one, as the rufous, the year that it didn't show up. And this guy wins the prize for the best shaped roosting hole, shape of an owl. Fun little critters. And again, they're about the size of a softball, about like that. We have a lot of great horned owls in our area. They're about 18 to 25 inches tall. Wingspan is about 4.5 feet. These are extremely efficient predators. Their talons are extremely powerful, and usually they'll break the spinal cord of what it is they've caught. Other raptors, small Cooper's hawks and so forth, rabbits, rodents, small pets sometimes. And they're mostly active at night, but they do roost during the daytime. So if you look in cottonwood trees, big cavities, things like that, you can usually see them. Or sometimes they just roost in the very dense foliage. This one wasn't happy. She's nesting on eggs in a snowstorm, and it snowed so hard the eggs failed, and she moved on. This is out in the county on a sidewalk right behind somebody's yard. People are literally walking underneath the nest on the sidewalk. The nest is about a foot off and about 12 feet up in the air. And so here I am again with my 1,000-millimeter lens and cropping to make them look like you can see them better, even though I'm not right on top of them. This is the papa. In great horned owls, it's the mother, it's the female that does all the roosting and brooding, and dad just brings food. One of the babes just before they fledged. Come in different colors, different sizes, and there's a lot of them around in our area. And they weather the storm. She's sitting on eggs again, ever watchful. There's one of her hatchlings. There's the 3 of them at sunrise. And they're all sitting there with their eyes closed, just sitting there waiting for mom or dad to bring food. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, 30, 40 minutes. And some dogs in the distance start barking. And so they all open their eyes to see what's going on. And there's your instant for your picture. Patience is a good thing to have when you want to do wildlife photography. This is my backyard. I live on a lake, and there's big cottonwood trees. And every night depending on the time shift, about 15 or 20 minutes after sunset, she comes, and this is a subadult, and looks for rabbits in the backyard of my neighbors. Gorgeous creatures. And I'm going to blaze through these bald eagles. I have 7.5 years of following this nesting pair. You'll see change of seasons, mating, refurbishing the nest, feeding the young, so forth. But since we're almost out of time, I'm just going to, this is out the roof of this car. This is my backyard. This dead cottonwood snag is where they perch. And this is what really got me started photographing bald eagles, was seeing them there and thinking, wow, they're not afraid of me. They're sitting there preening and so forth. And so this is what really prompted me. This bald eagle flew from one branch, snagged the one, and flew away to put it in the nest. And that's what really kind of triggered me. I should be photographing the nest. Well, this is their nest. I went to the private property owner and made an agreement with them that I would never tell anyone where it is, and that I would ring the doorbell when I wanted to come photograph. And after a couple of times, she said, that's not necessary. You just go ahead and do what you want. And then in the second year, her husband actually set a bench out in their backyard for me to be able to sit there and wait, because I spent hour upon hour waiting for them to come or go, or bring some food for the young or so forth. There she's sitting on the eggs and he's bringing food. There's one of their youngsters. It's about a month old. A lot of time preening and refurbishing the nest and doing this. The stick that this eagle had was about this long. It was pretty amazing to see it do that. Of course, all seasons, that frosty morning, I knew there was a picture there. And they're continually bringing nest, material, bark, grass, so forth, year-round. She's feeding, but you can't see them because they're so tiny. They have young. Finally, they're about 2 weeks old. They get big enough that you can see them. And they move around the nest enough so that you can see them. There's mama protecting them from the afternoon sun. Bringing a fish in the snowstorm. Feeding. Again, feeding the young as they get bigger. There's the 3 that were shielded by the mother in the afternoon sun. They're just about ready to fledge. It's mama. Let me go back to that one. You can see she has a little fleck in her eye, in the yellow part of her eye, and I can always tell when it's her. After the young fledge, they don't spend much time around their nest tree. They use, these are great blue heron nests, just to hang out in the tree in my backyard and so forth. They don't hang around the nest. This is one of their juveniles on our tree. That back talon is called a hallux, and in the females, it's considerably larger than the male, and the bird is itself too, but that's a sort of another way, when that hallux is so enormous that you're looking at a female. Grabbing a fish on the lake. It was New Year's Day. Looked out the window and the eagle was trying to carry away a goose. It tried about 3 or 4 times, it never did, and it didn't survive. They ate it down the lakefront a couple of days later. Lots of stretching and waiting. Here's that same tree. More young. In the fall, they start to refurbish the nest again. Let me stop here. You can see the female's on the right. You see the little fleck in her eye, but you can see she's bigger, taller, and her tail sticks out longer. Females are normally about 20, 25% larger than the males. That's a good illustration of the size difference. She's refurbishing the nest this time. More nesting material, come and go. This stick was enormous. I don't know how I even got it. A little mating action, bringing food to feed her while she's on the nest. We had a snowstorm in 2021. We had 2 feet of snow, and there were about 6 or 8 days in the single-digit temperatures. The eggs didn't survive. So they had no chicks in 2021, no eaglets. So this is in 2022. They waited exactly a month to the day to breed from when they had the previous year. And there was no snowstorms, and the eaglets survived. Mother Nature's pretty remarkable. There's a couple of hatchlings. There's one. And that's them as they got old enough to fly away. There's my 1,000-millimeter lens and my helpful assistant, Miss Calita. So thank you all. Hope we didn't run too long. Hope you enjoyed seeing things and I didn't bore you. Appreciate seeing all my colleagues' fabulous work and their different approaches. Wildlife photography is, like I said, I do it in my free time. Maybe someday when I retire, I could do it to make a little money and survive on. I do calendars and note cards and stuff like that, but it's sort of just to support what's an expensive hobby. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we will not do questions. However, you'll please, take a moment, follow our panelists today on Instagram, or you could reach out to them. Their contact information is in the program. So once again, please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.